The Young and the Restless spoilers shock next week, January 20th to January 24th, 2025. Betrayal, secrets, and revenge. The high-stakes game between Claire and Jordan in a world teeming with betrayal and hidden motives. Claire found herself standing at a dangerous crossroads. She wanted Jordan dead. But deep down, she knew eliminating her nemesis wouldn't be simple. Jordan was a master tactician, a woman whose ability to anticipate betrayal was almost as notorious as her ruthlessness. Claire couldn't afford to underestimate her, no one could. Every move against Jordan had to be calculated, precise, and layered with deception. Jordan, as always, had a trump card, Sharon. A pawn she had kept in her clutches for years. Sharon wasn't just a tool, she was leverage. Her whereabouts were shrouded in secrecy, known only to Jordan herself. Sharon's life dangled precariously in the balance, making every action Claire contemplated feel like a double-edged sword. The secrets began to unravel. Meanwhile, Claire's actions were far from unnoticed. Nick, unaware of her meetings with Jordan, remained blissfully ignorant of the deadly web she was weaving. His trust in Claire was genuine, but fragile. If he were to discover the truth, especially that Jordan had confessed to kidnapping Sharon, it would shatter him. Yet, Claire couldn't afford to involve Nick, not when she was so consumed by her personal vendetta. But Victor was a different story. He had been silently observing from the shadows, a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Through cunning and subterfuge, Victor had overheard every detail of Claire's interaction with Jordan. Unlike Nick, Victor didn't have the luxury of naivety. He understood the stakes all too well and was determined to dismantle the foolish alliance Claire seemed to be forming. To him, this wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival. Victor's moral compass was a complex one. Though he understood the allure of vengeance, he also knew the cost of recklessness. Claire's pursuit of Jordan was not only personal but reckless, a gamble that placed lives, including her own, on the line. And Victor wasn't willing to let her risk everything for the sake of settling a grudge. Victor's intervention. Claire, however, was adamant. She didn't want Victor meddling in her affairs. This was her battle, her feud, and she intended to see it through to the end. But Victor wasn't so easily swayed. His approach was calculated, like a chess master planning several moves ahead. He recognized that Claire was walking into a trap, one she might not survive. Victor's strategy was simple but effective: sow discord and dismantle Jordan's web of control. He knew that by targeting Sharon's captivity, he could weaken Jordan's leverage. But first, he needed to find Sharon, and for that, he needed allies, even reluctant ones. Nick, though unaware of the full story, became an unknowing piece in Victor's game. By feeding Nick just enough information to spark his curiosity, Victor began to set the stage for his own plan. Claire's growing desperation. As Victor maneuvered behind the scenes, Claire's desperation grew. Every passing moment felt like a ticking clock, her window of opportunity narrowing. She couldn't shake the feeling that Jordan was always one step ahead, anticipating her every move. Claire's paranoia became her greatest enemy, clouding her judgment and driving her deeper into isolation. She tried to keep Victor at bay, but his presence loomed large. The more she pushed him away, the more persistent he became. To Victor, Claire's independence wasn't a strength, it was a liability. He saw through her bravado, recognizing the fear that simmered beneath her determination. Jordan's counterattack. Jordan, ever the strategist, wasn't idle. She sensed the cracks forming in Claire's resolve and began to exploit them. Using Sharon as bait, she sent cryptic messages designed to unnerve Claire further. Each message was a reminder of her control, a reminder that Claire's quest for revenge would cost her dearly. Jordan also took steps to secure her position, reinforcing her alliances and eliminating potential threats. Her network was vast, and her resources seemingly limitless. While Claire scrambled for answers, Jordan operated with cold precision, her moves calculated and deliberate. Victor's plan takes shape. Victor knew he had to act before Claire made a fatal mistake. Using his extensive network, he uncovered a lead on Sharon's possible location. But instead of sharing this information with Claire, he decided to confront Jordan directly. For Victor, this wasn't just about saving Sharon or stopping Claire's vendetta. It was about restoring balance and preventing further bloodshed. The confrontation between Victor and Jordan was tense, a clash of two formidable minds. Victor offered Jordan a deal: release Sharon and walk away, or face the full weight of his wrath. Jordan, unaccustomed to being cornered, found herself at a rare disadvantage. But even as she considered Victor's ultimatum, her mind raced with contingency plans. The climactic showdown. As Victor worked to secure Sharon's release, Claire refused to stand idle. She orchestrated her own plan, determined to confront Jordan on her terms. Unbeknownst to her, Victor had anticipated this and prepared a countermeasure. He wasn't about to let Claire's recklessness derail his efforts. The climax unfolded in a secluded location, where all the players converged. Claire, armed with nothing but her determination, confronted Jordan. Their exchange was a volatile mix of accusations and revelations. Jordan, ever the manipulator, played on Claire's insecurities, taunting her with the futility of her quest. But Victor's timely intervention turned the tide. Arriving with a team of allies, he exposed Jordan's vulnerabilities and dismantled her defenses. Sharon was rescued, and Jordan, for once, found herself outmaneuvered. Aftermath. In the aftermath, Claire was forced to confront the consequences of her actions. Her quest for revenge had nearly cost her everything, and it was Victor who had ultimately ensured her survival. Though grateful, Claire couldn't help but feel a lingering resentment. This was supposed to be her victory, her closure. Victor, ever pragmatic, offered a final piece of wisdom: revenge doesn't bring peace, Claire. It only leaves you with more questions. As the dust settled, the alliances shifted, and the players retreated to lick their wounds. But one thing was certain: in the high-stakes game of betrayal and power, no one emerged unscathed. Dreams of Sharon, a family torn by fear and despair. The disappearance of Sharon weighed heavily on the hearts of her loved ones, leaving Nick, Mariah, and Faith trapped in a cycle of grief and helplessness. Their shared agony manifested in an unrelenting series of dreams, vivid, haunting visions of Sharon calling out for help, but always just out of reach. Each time they awoke, they were left with the same hollow question: where is Sharon? Mariah's grim realization. As days turned into weeks, the family's initial hope began to crumble. Mariah, always the pragmatist, was the first to voice what everyone feared but refused to acknowledge. "We need to prepare for the worst," she said one evening, her voice trembling but firm. "If we keep having these dreams, it could mean Sharon's already gone. Maybe we should think about arranging a funeral, just in case." Her words cut through the room like a knife. Nick's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightening as he struggled to suppress his emotions. Faith, sitting quietly in the corner, broke into tears. The idea of giving up, even symbolically, felt like a betrayal. But Mariah's logic was undeniable. Their dreams might not be a sign of hope but a cruel echo of reality. Still, Nick refused to accept it. "We're not burying Sharon until I know for sure. Dead or alive, I'm going to find her." The familiar stranger, unbeknownst to the family, the person responsible for Sharon's disappearance, wasn't some nameless villain. It was someone they all knew, a woman with a face that should have triggered recognition, but their assumptions blinded them. After all, Jordan was locked away in prison, wasn't she? No one considered the possibility that her web of influence extended beyond her incarceration. No one thought to suspect someone else, operating in the shadows, on her behalf. The abductor, a shadowy and cunning figure, watched from the sidelines as the Newman family unraveled. She relished their confusion and pain, knowing full well that her connection to Jordan made her invisible. To the world, Jordan was powerless behind bars, but to this woman, she was a mentor, a strategist whose plans didn't end just because she was locked away. Claire's secret and silent guilt. The one person who knew the truth, who could end the family's torment, was Claire. She knew exactly who had taken Sharon, and she also knew why. But Claire's silence wasn't born of malice. She was trapped by her own complicated history with the abductor, a past riddled with secrets and betrayals she couldn't afford to reveal. Claire's refusal to speak was a decision rooted in fear. She feared not only the consequences of exposing the truth, but also the emotional fallout it would cause. Sharon's abductor was someone Claire once trusted, someone she never imagined would sink to such depths. But admitting this meant unraveling a story she wasn't ready to share, one that implicated her in ways that might ruin her relationships with everyone around her. A family on the brink. Meanwhile, the Newman family's patience wore thin. Mariah's suggestion of a funeral became a source of tension, dividing the household. Nick was adamant about holding on to hope, but his determination began to alienate him from the others. Faith, desperate for answers, withdrew into herself, haunted by the memories of her mother and the dreams that felt more like nightmares. The house felt colder, darker. The family dinners became quieter, the once lively conversations replaced by strained silence. They were united by grief, yet fractured by their differing ways of coping. Victor, ever the patriarch, grew more suspicious with each passing day. He knew Claire was hiding something, her evasiveness hadn't escaped his notice. But pressing her for answers required care. Victor understood better than anyone that the wrong move could drive Claire further into silence, or worse, into the arms of the enemy. Claire's misstep. As the days dragged on, Claire's guilt began to consume her. The weight of her decision to stay silent became unbearable, and it started affecting her judgment. She made small, careless mistakes, hesitating when questioned, avoiding direct eye contact. Victor noticed these cracks in her facade and began piecing together the truth. One evening, Victor confronted her in private. "Claire," he said, his voice low and measured, "I know you're hiding something. Whatever it is, it's killing you. And it's killing this family. If you know where Sharon is, or who took her, you need to speak up." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If I say anything, it'll only make things worse." "For who?" Victor pressed, his tone sharper now. "Worse for Sharon, or worse for you?" That question lingered in the air, unanswered. Claire couldn't bring herself to admit the truth, not yet. But Victor wasn't the type to back down. He made it his mission to find out what she was hiding, even if it meant going behind her back. A breaking point. The tension in the Newman family reached a breaking point when Faith, unable to cope with the uncertainty, lashed out during dinner. "Why isn't anyone doing anything?" she cried. "Why are we just sitting here, waiting for dreams to tell us what to do? Sharon wouldn't give up on us. So why are we giving up on her?" Her outburst shook everyone. Nick, who had been silently brooding, stood up abruptly and announced, "I'm not waiting anymore. If no one else is going to help me, I'll find Sharon myself." His declaration reignited the family's determination, but it also put more pressure on Claire. Watching the people she cared about fall apart was too much to bear. She realized that her silence wasn't protecting anyone, it was only prolonging their suffering. What comes next? Claire now faces an impossible choice: continue to conceal the truth and protect herself, or reveal what she knows and risk everything. Victor, ever the strategist, is closing in on the answers, but his methods may provoke consequences none of them are prepared for. Meanwhile, Sharon's fate hangs in the balance, her captor's identity closer to being exposed, but at what cost? As the family grapples with despair, and Claire teeters on the edge of confession, one thing is clear: the path to Sharon's rescue will be paved with difficult truths and even harder decisions. Kyle's discovery, a hidden connection between Claire and Jordan. Kyle couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about Claire. She had been distant, her behavior erratic, and her excuses, always hurried and vague, didn't add up. But Kyle wasn't one to jump to conclusions. If Claire was hiding something, he needed proof before confronting her. So, he began observing her, quietly piecing together the fragments of her secretive life. What he uncovered was far more shocking than he ever anticipated. Claire was in contact with Jordan. A shocking revelation. The first time Kyle noticed Claire's odd behavior was during a late-night phone call. She had stepped outside, thinking everyone else in the house was asleep. But Kyle, awake and restless, saw her pacing in the garden, whispering urgently into her phone. At first, he dismissed it as a private conversation, perhaps even a personal issue she wasn't ready to share. But the next day, she disappeared for hours without explanation. Curiosity turned into suspicion when Kyle stumbled upon a text message on Claire's phone, a message from Jordan. Jordan. The name alone was enough to send Kyle's mind racing. How could Claire, who had openly denounced Jordan and severed ties with her, be in contact with her now? The connection runs deeper. Kyle didn't confront Claire immediately. Instead, he decided to dig deeper. Using his resources, he tracked Claire's movements and discovered a pattern. Her unexplained absences coincided with visits to a secluded location on the outskirts of town. It was there, Kyle confirmed, that she had been meeting Jordan in person. But why? Jordan was a dangerous woman, someone who had manipulated and betrayed those around her countless times. Claire had every reason to hate her, to want nothing to do with her. Yet, here she was, meeting Jordan in secret. It didn't make sense, or at least, not yet. The burden of secrecy. Kyle wrestled with the decision to reveal what he knew. Should he confront Claire directly? Should he tell Victor or Nick? The Newman family had already been through so much. Adding this revelation to the mix could shatter what little trust remained between them. And what if he was wrong? What if Claire wasn't working with Jordan willingly but was being coerced? Kyle's instincts told him to wait, to gather more evidence before making a move. If Claire was being manipulated, confronting her too soon could push her further into Jordan's control. He couldn't risk that. He needed to understand the full extent of their relationship before taking action. Claire and Jordan's secret meetings. During one of his surveillance outings, Kyle managed to observe a meeting between Claire and Jordan. From his hidden vantage point, he watched as the two women talked animatedly, their body language tense yet familiar. Jordan, ever the master manipulator, appeared calm and commanding, while Claire seemed conflicted, her expressions shifting between frustration and guilt. Kyle couldn't hear their words, but the scene was telling. Jordan was clearly in control, and Claire's reluctance was evident. Whatever bond existed between them, it wasn't one of equals. Claire looked trapped, as though she were carrying a burden too heavy to share. Theories and doubts. Kyle began forming theories about what might be happening. Was Claire being blackmailed? Did Jordan have something on her, some dark secret that forced her into compliance? Or was it possible that Claire, despite everything, still felt some loyalty to Jordan? Their history was complex, filled with betrayal and estrangement, but also moments of closeness. Perhaps Claire was trying to protect someone, maybe even Sharon, by playing along with Jordan's schemes. Whatever the reason, Kyle knew he couldn't sit idly by. If Claire was being used, he needed to save her. But to do that, he had to understand her motivations and uncover Jordan's endgame. A dangerous game. As Kyle delved deeper, he began to uncover more unsettling details. Jordan wasn't just pulling Claire's strings, she was orchestrating a larger plan, one that involved Sharon's disappearance and the chaos surrounding the Newman family. Claire, whether she realized it or not, was a pawn in Jordan's dangerous game. Kyle realized he was running out of time. If he waited too long, Claire might become too deeply entangled to be saved. But acting too soon could backfire, exposing her to even greater danger. The stakes were higher than ever, and the margin for error was razor thin. Kyle's dilemma. Kyle faced an impossible choice. Should he confront Claire and risk alienating her, or should he continue his silent investigation and risk being too late to help? His protective instincts warred with his sense of caution, each urging him in a different direction. But one thing was clear, Kyle couldn't walk away. Claire mattered too much to him. If she was in trouble, he would do whatever it took to pull her out of it, even if it meant putting himself at risk. What comes next? Kyle's next steps will determine not only Claire's fate but the outcome of the entire Newman family's struggle. If he succeeds in uncovering the truth and freeing Claire from Jordan's influence, he might be able to turn the tide against Jordan. But if he fails, the consequences could be catastrophic, not just for Claire, but for everyone caught in Jordan's web. One thing is certain, Kyle won't stop until he gets to the bottom of this. For Claire's sake, and for the family he swore to protect, he will uncover the truth, no matter the cost.